From Frank Matthews vanishing with $100 million like a ghost in the wind, to Larry Hoover commanding killers from a supermax cell, and Lorenzo Fat Cat ordering executions over petty disrespect and still pulling strings behind bars. These are the most vicious Black Mafia bosses still ruling from the shadows. Frank Black Caesar Matthews. In the annals of American organized crime, few figures have captured the imagination quite like Frank Larry Matthews, better known as Black Caesar, Mark IV, or Pee-wee, a man who rose from abject poverty to control a drug trafficking empire that rivaled the Italian Mafia in scope and profitability, only to vanish into thin air with a fortune that would be worth over $100 million in today's money, leaving behind one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in criminal history. By the late 1960s, Matthews had achieved what many thought impossible. He sourced heroin directly from suppliers connected to the French Connection, bypassing the Mafia's control and becoming reportedly the only non-Italian with such direct access. This allowed him to undercut competitors with purer, cheaper product, while maintaining the kind of profit margins that would make Wall Street executives jealous. Matthews' empire spanned at least 21 states, from New York to California, with key hubs in Brooklyn, Harlem, and Detroit. He organized a network of Black and Latino dealers, hosting summits in Atlanta and Las Vegas to unify minority traffickers and create an independent supply chain that could challenge the Italian Mafia's dominance. This wasn't just drug dealing. This was revolutionary economic warfare against the established criminal order. His organization processed and distributed massive quantities of heroin and cocaine, allegedly generating $1, $2 million per week, equivalent to $8, $16 million per week in today's money. Matthews laundered money through real estate, buying luxury homes and cars, including a fleet nicknamed Mark IV, and even a Staten Island mansion next to Mafia bosses like Paul Castellano and Carlo Gambino, who resented his presence in their upscale neighborhood. Matthews earned his Black Caesar moniker through brutal enforcement, linking him to multiple murders, kidnappings, and extortion. In one infamous incident, after being robbed of $375,000 by a Genovese family associate, Matthews kidnapped the thief's relative and demanded repayment, securing not only his money, but an extra 25 kilograms of heroin as compensation. This wasn't just business, this was a declaration of war against anyone who dared to cross him. The DEA described him as one of the biggest heroin and cocaine traffickers in United States history, responsible for flooding eastern cities with drugs during a deadly epidemic. At his peak in 1972, Matthews lived lavishly with fur coats, diamond jewelry, a common-law wife, Barbara Hinton, 3 children, and a mistress, Denise Brown, while projecting a Robin Hood image in Black communities through charitable donations. And then, on June 26, 1973, days before a court hearing, Matthews did something that no major crime boss had ever done before. He simply vanished. He withdrew an estimated $15, $20 million from safety deposit boxes, equivalent to $100, $130 million today, packed suitcases, and fled with his mistress Denise Brown in a rented car. He left his wife, children, and Staten Island home behind, telling his family, "I'll see you soon," words that would prove to be his final goodbye. The FBI launched a massive manhunt, but found no trace. Various theories suggest escape abroad or murder by rivals, but no evidence supports Matthews being active post-1973. If alive, he would be 81 years old in 2025. But while Matthews vanished without a trace, another Mafia boss rose to notoriety in plain sight, straddling the worlds of hip-hop and homicide. James Jimmy Henchman Rosemond. In the intersection where hip-hop culture meets organized crime, few figures have wielded as much influence or generated as much controversy as James Jimmy Henchman Rosemond, a man who built an empire straddling the worlds of legitimate entertainment and illicit drug trafficking, becoming one of the most connected and ultimately most dangerous power brokers in the music industry before his violent nature led to his permanent downfall. But Rosemond was different from typical street criminals. He had vision, ambition, and the intelligence to see opportunities where others saw only chaos. In 1991, he co-founded the influential hip-hop conference How Can I Be Down, which became a breeding ground for emerging artists and industry networking. This wasn't just about music, this was about building power, influence, and legitimacy in a rapidly expanding cultural movement. In June 2011, Rosemond was arrested by DEA agents and U.S. Marshals in New York City after a months-long manhunt, charged under the Kingpin statute for leading a bi-coastal drug trafficking organization. This wasn't small-time dealing. smuggling. The organization allegedly transported up to 30 kilograms of cocaine monthly from Los Angeles to New York, using methods like Federal Express, UPS, and music equipment cases to conceal drugs and cash. But what truly earned Rosemond his reputation for ruthlessness was his involvement in one of hip-hop's most shocking murders. Rosemond's most notorious criminal act was his role in the 2009 murder of Lowell "Lodi" Mac Fletcher, an associate of the rap group G-Unit. The murder was allegedly in retaliation for Fletcher's role in the 2007 assault on Rosemond's teenage son by G-Unit members, including Marvin Tony Yayo Bernard. Prosecutors claimed Rosemond orchestrated a murder-for-hire plot, paying a hitman with a kilogram of cocaine, valued at $30,000, to kill Fletcher. On September 27, 2009, Fletcher was lured to a secluded location in the Bronx and shot 5 times with a silenced .22 caliber handgun. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was calculated, cold-blooded revenge executed with military precision. Rosemond was charged in 2012 with murder for hire and conspiracy to commit murder. After a mistrial in 2014, he was convicted in a 2017 retrial and sentenced to life plus 30 years. Perhaps even more shocking are the allegations linking Rosemond to one of hip-hop's most infamous unsolved crimes. Rosemond has been linked to the 1994 shooting and robbery of Tupac Shakur at Quad Recording Studios in New York, an incident that fueled the East Coast-West Coast rap feud. Tupac named Rosemond in his 1996 song Against All Odds, vowing retribution. As of August 2, 2025, James Rosemond remains incarcerated, serving multiple life sentences for drug trafficking and murder-for-hire convictions. As the East Coast music scene grappled with Rosemond's double life, another kingpin was rewriting the rules of control from the streets of Boston. Daryl Whiting. Daryl Whiting, born in 1956 in Corona, Queens, New York, established himself as the undisputed king of Boston's drug trade through a combination of strategic brilliance, calculated generosity, and merciless violence. In the late 1980s, Whiting founded the New York Boys, a drug trafficking organization that became one of Boston's most formidable criminal enterprises during the crack cocaine epidemic. Operating primarily out of the Orchard Park, now Academy Homes, and Columbia Point housing projects in Roxbury and Dorchester, New York, Boys established a sophisticated drug network that distributed large quantities of crack cocaine across Boston's African-American neighborhoods. What set Whiting apart from typical street dealers was the corporate-level sophistication of his operation. The New York Boys were highly structured, with a clear hierarchy that included lieutenants, runners, and enforcers. The organization sourced cocaine from New York City, converting it into crack in Boston for distribution. And at its peak, the group reportedly grossed millions of dollars. Whiting exerted near-total control over Orchard Park, where he was both feared and revered, using pagers and street-level dealers to move product with remarkable efficiency. But Whiting's genius lay not just in his criminal organization, it was in his understanding of the psychology of power and community control. Despite his criminal activities, Whiting cultivated a complex image in Boston's communities, known for acts of generosity such as providing financial support to residents of the housing projects, paying for college expenses for some youths, and organizing community events. However, these acts of apparent philanthropy masked a darker reality. Prosecutors later argued that Whiting's community generosity was a strategic facade designed to maintain control and deter cooperation with law enforcement. Whiting's reputation for ruthlessness stemmed from his use of violence to maintain discipline and eliminate rivals, with the New York Boys implicated in multiple shootings, beatings, and murders to protect their territory. A 1992 Boston Globe article described him as a kingpin who ruled through fear, with residents of Orchard Park afraid to cross him. In 1991, Whiting was convicted on multiple counts, including drug trafficking and murder, with prosecutors presenting evidence of his leadership of the New York Boys, supported by witness testimony and seized drugs and cash. A key factor in his conviction was testimony from cooperating witnesses, though some later recanted, claiming coercion by authorities. Whiting was sentenced to life without parole in 1992 and sent to federal prison, where he remains as of 2025. As of August 2, 2025, Daryl Whiting is serving a life sentence in federal prison with no indication of release or active involvement in organized crime. His incarceration since 1992 and the dismantling of the New York Boys have ended his direct influence over Boston's criminal landscape. And just as Whiting's empire fell, an even deadlier force was consolidating power in Queens, with murder as his calling card. Lorenzo "Fat Cat" Nichols. In the hierarchy of New York's most feared drug kingpins, few names command the same level of respect and terror as Lorenzo "Fat Cat" Nichols, a man whose rise from petty criminal to multimillionaire drug lord represents one of the most ruthless and calculated criminal careers in American organized crime history. In 1976, at age 18, Nichols was convicted of 2 robberies and sentenced to 18 years in prison, but was paroled after serving only 2.5 years in 1980. This early release would prove to be one of the criminal justice system's most catastrophic mistakes. After his release, Nichols quickly established himself as a major drug lord in South Jamaica, Queens, capitalizing on the crack cocaine boom of the 1980s with the ruthless efficiency of a Fortune 500 CEO. Operating from The Block, a section of 150th Street, and using Big Mac's Deli, inherited from his then-wife Joanne's father, as his headquarters, Nichols ran a sophisticated drug trafficking organization that grossed an estimated $20 million annually. His nickname, Fat Cat, derived from his linebacker-thick neck, a head so big it nearly blocked out his friends' faces in snapshots, and his rangy beard. Nichols's operation, sometimes referred to as the Babos, was highly structured, employing approximately 300 workers, including close family members like his mother, Louisa Coleman, and 2 sisters. Key associates included Howard "Pappy" Mason, a prison acquaintance who became a security enforcer, Luke "Spoon" Stephen, Joseph "Mike Bones" Rogers, and Brian Glaze Gibbs. Nichols sourced cocaine from Italian Mafia connections and distributed it through a network of dealers in Queens housing projects, also supplying other groups such as Kenneth "Supreme" McGriff's operation. What truly set Nichols apart from other drug dealers was his willingness to commit murder not just for business reasons, but for personal slights that revealed the depth of his narcissistic rage. Nichols pleaded guilty to ordering the murders of 2 individuals: Isaac Bolden, killed in 1986 after robbing Nichols's then-girlfriend Carolyn Tyson, and Myrtle Horsham, his 20-year-old ex-girlfriend and mother of his son. In 1985, after his parole officer Brian Rooney arrested him for parole violation following a raid on Big Mac's Deli, Nichols ordered Rooney's murder. Rooney was shot dead on October 10, 1985, by hitmen paid $5,000 and 125 grams of cocaine. Nichols later claimed he only intended for Rooney to be roughed up to miss a parole hearing, but prosecutors argued it was a targeted execution for disrespecting him. Assistant DA Warren Silverman described Nichols as soft-spoken but deadly, noting he could say "kill him" in a real soft voice, and there were bodies stacked up like cords of wood in Jamaica as a result. Even after his 1985 arrest, Nichols continued running his drug empire from behind bars, ordering hits and managing operations through loyal associates, demonstrating a level of criminal sophistication that rivaled any organized crime syndicate. His ability to orchestrate murders from prison, including those of a childhood friend in Horsham, underscored his ruthless nature and complete disregard for human life. In April 2022, Nichols was granted parole from state prison over objections from the Queens DA and police union. Having served 34 years, he was transferred to federal custody at Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, to complete his federal sentence. In February 2023, Judge Edward Corman ruled that Nichols had, in effect, served his 40-year federal sentence, accounting for 4 years in state prison not previously credited, leading to his release from federal custody. However, Nichols is not fully free, as he faces a 10-year sentence in Florida for a 2007 conviction related to a car theft and title fraud ring. As of 2025, Nichols is serving this sentence, with a projected release by 2026. As of August 2, 2025, Lorenzo "Fat Cat" Nichols is serving a 10-year sentence in Florida, with a projected release by 2026. There is no evidence from reliable sources indicating Nichols is actively involved in organized crime in 2025. His incarceration since 1985, spanning nearly 40 years, and his current sentence preclude him from being an active mafia boss. Yet even Nichols' fury paled next to this man who commanded armies from behind bars, reshaping gang warfare on a national scale. Larry Hoover. In the violent landscape of Chicago's organized crime, one name towers above all others as both a symbol of strategic brilliance and ruthless ambition. Larry Hoover, known as King Larry, the founder of the Gangster Disciples, who transformed a local street gang into a nationwide criminal enterprise that at its peak employed an estimated 30,000 members across multiple states. In the late 1960s, Hoover merged the Supreme Gangsters with a rival gang led by David Barksdale to form the Black Gangster Disciple Nation, BGDN. After Barksdale's death in 1974, Hoover assumed full leadership leadership, renaming the group the Gangster Disciples, GD, and beginning his transformation of a local gang into a sophisticated criminal organization. By the 1970s and 1980s, the GD controlled large portions of Chicago's south and west sides, engaging in drug trafficking, extortion, and violent crimes. The gang expanded nationally, operating in cities across multiple states, with an estimated 30,000 members at its peak. By 1976, Hoover's operation spanned multiple states, employing a sophisticated hierarchy with 7 lieutenants, each managing a dozen mid-level distributors who supplied up to 40 street-level dealers each. But what truly demonstrated Hoover's ruthlessness was his ability to maintain and expand his criminal empire from behind bars. In 1973, Hoover was convicted of ordering the murder of 19-year-old drug dealer William Pookie Young, who was suspected of stealing from the GD. Young was shot in Englewood, Chicago on February 26, 1973, and Hoover received a 150 to 200-year sentence in Illinois State Prison. Despite imprisonment, Hoover maintained control over the GD through lieutenants like Gregory Schell and Little Frank Smith. A 17-year federal investigation, 1980 to 1997, revealed he directed drug trafficking, extortion, and money laundering from state prison using coded messages and prison visits. The GD distributed cocaine and heroin across Chicago, generating millions in revenue under his remote leadership. In 1997, Hoover was convicted on 40 federal counts, including conspiracy, extortion, money laundering, and running a continuing criminal enterprise, earning 6 life sentences. Prosecutors described him as one of the most notorious criminals in Illinois history, citing his ability to lead a vast gang from solitary confinement. What makes Hoover's case particularly remarkable is his continued influence even from the most secure prisons in America. A 2021 federal indictment alleged Hoover appointed gang leaders from ADX Florence, a supermax prison, and a 2024 motion claimed he instructed GD members to suspend gang activity using coded basketball analogies during a prison visit. In a significant development, on May 28, 2025, President Trump commuted Hoover's federal life sentences, directing the U.S. Bureau of Prisons to release him from federal custody. However, Hoover remains in Illinois State Prison for the 1973 murder conviction, with a sentence of 150 to 200 years. But before Hoover's dominance, another Chicago titan had already blurred the line between revolutionary and terrorist: Jeff Fort. In the pantheon of American organized crime bosses, few figures have combined revolutionary political aspirations with calculated criminal violence as effectively as Jeff Fort, also known as Abdul Malik Kaba, the founder of the El Rukien faction of the Black Pea Stone Nation, who built one of Chicago's most powerful criminal organizations while maintaining the audacious vision of transforming street gangs into a legitimate political force. It was at the Illinois State Training School in the late 1950s that Fort met Eugene "Bull" Hairston, with whom he co-founded the Blackstone Rangers in 1959, named after Blackstone Avenue in Woodlawn. This partnership would prove to be the foundation of one of Chicago's most powerful and enduring criminal organizations. In the 1960s, Fort and Hairston transformed the Blackstone Rangers into a dominant street gang, controlling Woodlawn through drug trafficking, extortion, and violence. After Hairston's imprisonment in 1966, Fort assumed full leadership, renaming the group the Black Pea Stone Nation, BPSN. By the late 1960s, the BPSN had an estimated 3,000 members and was one of Chicago's most powerful gangs. In the 1970s, Fort converted to Islam, adopting the name Abdul Malik Kaba and renaming his faction the El Rukens, meaning cornerstone in Arabic. This shift incorporated elements of Moorish science and black Muslim ideology, though former prosecutor Patrick Deddy argued it was a strategic move to complicate law enforcement efforts, as religious affiliations made search warrants and wiretaps harder to obtain. Fort's reputation for ruthlessness was built through decades of calculated violence and his willingness to eliminate anyone who threatened his organization. As a teenager, Fort was known for breaking up fights like a cyclone, earning a reputation as someone who could kill a brick, according to attorney James Montgomery. His early arrests for theft and assault reflected his willingness to use violence to establish dominance. In 1972, Fort was convicted of defrauding a $1.4 million federal grant intended for job training programs through the Woodlawn organization, serving 2 years at Leavenworth Federal Prison while maintaining gang leadership through loyal lieutenants. In 1983, Fort was convicted of drug trafficking, receiving a 13-year sentence. In 1981, he ordered the murder of rival drug dealer Willie Dollar Bill Bibbs, shot 23 times in a Southside barbershop. But Fort's most audacious and ruthless act came in the 1980s, when when he orchestrated what federal prosecutors called one of the most shocking terrorist conspiracies in American history. Fort's most notorious crime came in 1987, when he was convicted of conspiracy and weapons charges for plotting to commit terrorist attacks in the U.S. on behalf of Libya. Envious of a $5 million payment from Libya to Louis Farrakhan's Nation of Islam, Fort sent El Ruken emissaries to Libya and Panama, negotiating $2.50 million in weapons to bomb U.S. buildings, including a military base and an airplane. The Chicago Sun-Times described Fort as offering to blow up everything from a military base to an airplane for profit, highlighting his willingness to commit acts of terrorism for financial gain. The plot was uncovered by federal wiretaps, leading to an 80-year sentence for the terrorism conspiracy and a 75-year state sentence for the 1981 Bibbs murder. Fort's criminal career has been defined by multiple convictions spanning decades: 1972 to 1976, fraud; 1983, drug trafficking; and 1987, terrorism, conspiracy, and murder, with combined sentences totaling 168 years. In 1997, he was transferred to ADX Florence Supermax Prison in Colorado, where he remains under a no human contact order as of 2025. As of August 2, 2025, Jeff Fort is incarcerated at ADX Florence Supermax Prison in Colorado, serving a 168-year sentence under a no human contact order. His ongoing incarceration since 1972 and isolation at one of America's most secure facilities make ongoing criminal leadership impossible. Meanwhile, outside the U.S., a Caribbean overlord was building an empire so feared it nearly toppled a government. Christopher Dudas Koch. In the violent landscape of Caribbean organized crime, where drug trafficking and political corruption intersect with devastating consequences, few figures have wielded as much power or inspired as much fear as Christopher Dudas Koch, the Jamaican drug lord whose reign over Kingston's Tivoli Gardens transformed him into a folk hero for some and a ruthless tyrant for others. Christopher Dudas Koch, born March 13, 1969 in Kingston, Jamaica, inherited leadership of the Shower Posse after his father's mysterious 1992 prison death. Raised in Tivoli Gardens Garrison Community, he attended elite private schools funded by drug profits. Gardens Garrison Community, he attended elite private schools funded by drug profits. The Shower Posse, named for showering victims with bullets, became an international organization under Christopher's leadership. He trafficked large quantities of marijuana and cocaine to the U.S. while smuggling firearms across the Caribbean. Positioning himself as a community don, Koch provided social services, earning the nickname President. He ran entertainment and construction companies, securing government contracts while allegedly executing enemies in makeshift jails. The Shower Posse's violent tactics included indiscriminate shooting with machine guns, distinguishing them from more discreet criminal organizations. The organization was linked to over 1,000 murders under his father's leadership. He ran an entertainment company, Presidential Click, and a construction business, Incomparable Enterprises, which secured lucrative government contracts. These ventures, combined with his charitable deeds, made him a folk hero to some, with placards during his 2010 manhunt reading, "Jesus died for us, so we will die for Dudas." U.S. extradition requests in 2009 sparked a diplomatic crisis and violent uprising in Tivoli Gardens. The May 2010 incursion by Jamaican forces resulted in over 73 civilian deaths. Captured in June 2010 and extradited to New York, Koch pleaded guilty to racketeering and received 23 years. His sentence was reduced by 17 months in 2024, with release scheduled for January 25, 2029. As of August 2025, he remains incarcerated with no evidence of active criminal leadership. As Koch's empire burned under global scrutiny, a quieter force was already perfecting the art of staying rich and out of reach. Terry Southwest T. Flenory. Terry Lee Flenory, born January 10, 1970 in Detroit, Michigan, co-founded the Black Mafia family, BMF, with his brother Demetrius Big Meech Flenory. Starting as teenagers selling $50 bags of cocaine as 50 Boys, they formally established BMF in 1985. BMF grew into one of the most significant drug trafficking organizations in U.S. history, generating over $270 million in profits by 2005. Terry managed the Los Angeles hub, handling cocaine shipments from Mexican cartels, while his brother ran Atlanta operations. The organization employed over 500 members at its peak. To legitimize their wealth, they founded BMF Entertainment in the early 2000s, promoting artists like Young Jeezy. By 2003, tensions between the brothers led to a split, with Terry operating independently in Los Angeles. In October 2005, a massive DEA raid arrested 30 BMF members, seizing $2 million in cash and $21 million in assets. Terry pleaded pleaded guilty in November 2007, receiving a 30-year sentence. He was granted compassionate release on May 5, 2020, due to health concerns and COVID-19 risks. President Joe Biden granted him clemency in December 2024, with his official release date set for August 17, 2025. Terry is active on Instagram at Southwest263, sharing updates about the BMF TV series on Stars. Unlike other crime figures known for violence, Terry's role was more logistical, focusing on supply chains rather than enforcement. But while Terry moved in silence, his brother made noise, turning the underworld into a spectacle of luxury, fame, and firepower. Demetrius Big Meech Flenory. If Terry Flenory was the calculated businessman of the Black Mafia family, then his older brother Demetrius Big Meech Flenory was the flamboyant emperor who ruled with charisma, intimidation, and an almost mythical presence that made him a legend in both the criminal underworld and hip-hop culture. While his younger brother handled the supply chain from Los Angeles, Big Meech ran the Atlanta hub, focusing on distribution and cultivating a high-profile, larger-than-life persona that drew celebrities, athletes, and musicians into his orbit. This wasn't just about moving product, this was about building a brand, creating a mythology, and establishing himself as the undisputed king of the streets. Big Meech's Atlanta operation distributed massive quantities of cocaine throughout the Southeast, with BMF employing over 500 members at its peak. But what truly set Meech apart was his understanding that in the modern drug game, perception was reality. He threw legendary parties, cultivated relationships with hip-hop stars, and lived with such ostentatious wealth that he became almost untouchable through sheer audacity. But this high-profile lifestyle, while making him a legend, also made him a target. By 2003, tensions with Terry led to a split that would weaken their empire's unified front. While Terry operated quietly from Los Angeles, Meech's flamboyant Atlanta lifestyle drew the kind of attention that federal law enforcement agencies dream about. The DEA's investigation intensified with Operation Motor City Mafia, and wiretaps revealed the operational details of their massive drug trafficking network. In October 2005, the walls finally closed in when a massive raid arrested 30 BMF members and seized millions in cash, drugs, and assets. Big Meech was arrested in 2005 and in November 2007 pleaded guilty to running a continuing criminal enterprise, receiving a 30-year sentence. But even behind bars, his legend continued to grow, with disciplinary records showing infractions like possessing a cell phone and intoxicants, proving that even prison walls couldn't completely contain his influence. But long before Meech turned the drug game into a lifestyle brand, one man ruled Queens with nothing but blood, silence, and absolute fear, best embodied by the man they called Supreme. Kenneth "Supreme" McGriff. Deep in the crack-infested streets of 1980s Queens, New York, one man's name struck fear into the hearts of rivals and residents alike. Kenneth "Supreme" McGriff, born on September 19, 1960 in South Jamaica, Queens, would rise to become one of the most notorious and genuinely ruthless figures in the history of African-American organized crime, earning his reputation not through flashy lifestyle or cultural influence, but through calculated violence and strategic brutality that would make hardened criminals think twice before crossing his path. But what truly set McGriff apart from other drug kingpins was his strategic understanding of violence as a tool of business. Under Miller's influence, particularly during McGriff's incarcerations, the gang committed numerous acts of violence to maintain dominance, including at least 8 homicides in 1987 alone. This wasn't random street violence, this was calculated, systematic elimination of threats to maintain absolute control. McGriff returned in 1987, but was arrested again after a raid uncovered drugs, firearms, and $25,000 in cash. In 1989, he pleaded guilty to a continuing criminal enterprise charge, receiving a 12-year sentence, but was released on parole in 1994. The cycle of incarceration and release only seemed to strengthen his resolve and his organization's loyalty. What truly earned McGriff his reputation for ruthlessness were his most severe convictions in 2007. He was convicted of racketeering, 2 murder-for-hire homicides, drug trafficking, and illegal financial transactions. The government proved that. He paid $50,000 to Harlem hitmen to kill rapper Eric E. Moneybags Smith on July 16, 2001, in retaliation for Smith's alleged role in the 1999 killing of McGriff's associate, Colbert Black Just Johnson. Smith was shot 11 times at a barbecue in an execution that demonstrated McGriff's willingness to reach across borough lines to settle scores. But McGriff wasn't finished. He also ordered the October 21, 2001, murder of Troy Big Nose Singleton, a Smith associate, to prevent retaliation, with Singleton shot multiple times, including 7 times while on the ground. These calculated killings, executed with military precision to protect his empire, cemented McGriff's ruthless reputation in a way that few other figures in organized crime could match. Authorities suspected him in the 2002 murder of Run DMC's Jam Master Jay and the 2000 attempted murder of 50 Cent, though these remain unproven. As of August 2025, McGriff, age 65, remains incarcerated with no prospect of release. His story inspired rappers in a 2022 Showtime documentary, Supreme Team.